Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our special Young Poets Award in Reading, featuring special guests Sekou Andrews and Arlington, Virginia's Poet Laureate, Holly Karapatakova. I am so excited to be joined not only by a number of our finalists who will read their winning poems and talk about them, but by my co-judge, friend, and remarkable poet in her own right, the amazing Maya Siegel. Thank you all for being here. Those of you that are checking this out, thank you for doing so. Thank you for supporting poetry. Thank you for supporting 1455. I'm Sean Murphy. I'm the executive director. I'm trying to contain my enthusiasm because this is not only one of my favorite parts of our annual SummerFest, it's one of my favorite parts of the year. There's nothing I enjoy more than showcasing great poetry, and any opportunity we have to showcase the up and coming poets who will become our most important voices is a real honor for me. Before we kick things off, I'm beside myself to say that we have the incredible honor and opportunity to have a special guest who sent us a poetic shout out from the West Coast that we're about to share, the miraculous Sekou Andrews. For those of you that don't know who he is, I'll read his bio, but I just want to personally say a word of not only immense gratitude for his generosity and class, but as a poet and as someone that advocates for the literary arts, I don't know anyone that's doing as much as Sekou to elevate the discourse, to celebrate the creation of poetry, to make poetry cool, which of course, those of us that know it's cool, but we always need ambassadors to talk about why poetry matters, why it is for everyone, why it's important, and why it's fun. So let me, and I will also say, this is an abbreviated version of a much longer and impressive bio that we have on the website. But let me give it a crack and just give you a taste of who we're dealing with here, and we are in the presence of greatness. Sekou Andrews is the CEO of Sekou World Incorporated and one of the most successful spoken word poets in the world. On any given day, this school teacher turned artist and entrepreneur who built a seven-figure company on poetry. Let me repeat that. Built a seven-figure company on poetry can be found keynoting at a Fortune 500 company, inspiring thousands at a concert, or performing for Barack Obama in Oprah's backyard, as we poets sometimes do. Sekou's accomplishments include 2 National Poetry Slam championships, 2 national poetry tours, 2 independent music awards, 3 Helen Hayes Awards, the most Just Plain Folks music awards in history, the 2020 ABA Entrepreneur of the Year, and the first Best Spoken Word Album Grammy nomination for a poet in 30 years. Combining innovation and inspiration, Sekou Andrews is redefining the notion of what a speaker is and what a poet can be. So without further ado, a blast of poetic bliss from the West Coast, courtesy of Sekou.
Someone once told me that I always start off my set by rubbing my eyes and saying how tired I am. Somebody once asked me, why do you always spit so much when you hit the mic? Well, the fact of the matter is, I am a poet. So my eyes are perpetually burning and bloodshot because it is my job to stare into the center of the sun until I singe the edges of my retina and my pupils bleed so that when I spit, you are no longer able to see the monsters that haunted you. I am a poet. That is to say, a reformed vampire who now feeds on your blood in order to suck out your poisons and hold them under my tongue and savor them so that when I finally spit, your life's cancers are corroded away by the verbal acids in my saliva. So if I take a minute to rub my eyes and tell you how tired I am, that's because my eyes hurt. Damn it, I'm tired. Shit. I'm trying to rescue lives up in here. I mean, just yesterday I was shot 41 times, filled with 41 bloody holes, and all I was doing, officer, was reaching for a poem that would reach your soul. This job ain't easy, so do not ask me why I spit so much. When I hit the mic, I spit because I don't know how not to. I spit because if I stand within 20 feet of any mic, I cannot not rock you. I spit because I suck at ball and never excelled in math. This is what the hell I do. And don't get it twisted. Oh, I do it for the money. Oh, I'm trying to get paid off this here. And why not? Poets got to pay rent. Poets got mortgage. Poets got rent, so there will be no discounts off my product tonight. Now, I'm collecting every cent. But don't get it twisted. I don't do it for the money. No, I'm trying to get saved off this here. So on any given Wednesday, I will spit to arenas of no less than 5,004, no less than 50,000. And on any given Thursday, I will find some community coffee shop with a seating capacity of 50 and spit the exact same set for free. This is for the love of the word. And contrary to the illusion of fame that my resume may appear to claim, oh, the league is still stingy when it comes to paying poets for our game. Meaning, I ain't going platinum no time soon. I done blown up and withered away so many times in this industry that my words have stretch marks. So when life feeds me lemons, oh baby, I suck on the pulp and savor the sour until I spit back lemonade. For the currency of blessings far outvalues any monetary aid. So I will continue to process my payments and I will continue to spit. I will spit eviscerating verbal colonics. Let me say it again. I will spit eviscerating verbal colonics designed to assist someone here tonight in removing the bullshit from the bowels of your potential. I will spit until someone here tonight erupts into the laughter that's been lodged in their spirit and trying to get out since their storm stopped. I will spit until I wash the ink and ill intentions off of the suicide note stuffed into the back pocket of someone here tonight. I will spit because someone here tonight has been stuck in the suffocation of a gasp since a loved one passed, or a lover unmasked, or a love couldn't last within reality's grasp. And even with no explicit positive message, these salivations of scar tissue lessons remind them to breathe and recognize that hardship is communal, healing is collective, so you do not battle alone. Lift your face to the heavens. Let this rain have its way with you. Listen hungrily as I pass you along the path of your adversity, and you just might hear your answers. Because we poets often look like transients, roaming the streets, whispering to ourselves. But while the transient has often turned away from the madness of this world and speaks to escape it, no, we poets, we turn toward the madness and we chase it and we spit until we can taste it and embrace it, until we can erase it and replace it. So let's face it, whether I'm at the Poetry Lounge, on network TV, or on 3rd Street Promenade, I spit for the ones who hunger for it like it's Ramadan. I spit because I can't not spit. I can't stop. I spit for my verbal gardeners who live to plant crops deep inside the fertile cerebellums of the masses. I spit for that poet who was supposed to follow me, who passes like, fuck that. No. I ain't stupid. I ain't going up after he. I spit because I seek not wealth. I seek mastery, because God's instructions were, before you die, you give me one masterpiece. Do not make me regret you. That is all that I ask of thee. I spit because sometimes at night, the words, they chase after me. I spit because a poet staying silent is blasphemy. Because just as I'm set to curse this wicked world that laughs at me, I hear the thirst in his voice as one desperate fan steps up asking me, please, tell my story tonight. Hey, spit one for me tonight, Sekou. And me, cursed to never know which one of y'all God sent me to touch so I can know when I'm finally done. I spit one for every one on every mic on every night until everybody leaves wet. Look, I can't afford to miss nobody, so if you ain't get hit yet, move closer. And remember, you must arrive here naked, but bring everything you have ever covered yourself with. Bring your apprehensions and your inhibitions. Bring your security blankets and your monsters. Bring your secrets and your psalms. Bring your chaos and your songs. Bring your pride and your predators. Bring your prayers and your prey. Bring your reverence. Bring your praise. Bring your rancor. Bring your rage. But most importantly, if you happen to be sitting at the front of the stage, and Sekou Andrews gets the chance to blaze, oh baby, you better bring a motherfucking raincoat, because I will spit. Cuckoo.
Wow. Sekou, let me just say on behalf of the organization and for the poetic community, micro, macro, everywhere in between, thank you for lifting us up. Thank you for making us feel seen. We see you, we appreciate you, and we love you. Thank you for honoring us with your poetic brilliance. All right, well, now we've kicked things up a few notches, so let's keep the party going. Like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite parts of the festival and the year. Before I get out of the way, which I really want to do, and shine the spotlight on the poets that are here with me, a few quick words about this year's contest. And for those of you that have never joined our annual reading or know what we do, just a little context for what this contest was all about and some of the things I saw. Having completed yet another 4th annual successful competition, I can confirm 2 things, just like I did last year. The contest gets bigger and better every cycle, and choosing a grand prize winner or 2 becomes more difficult. It's very much a labor of love, and I'm grateful for young poets from America and beyond for sharing their writing with us. We understand at 1455 that encouraging creativity applies to all ages and levels of experience. As such, we want to make a statement each year with this contest. And our grand prize awards and our runners-up awards. Recognizing our young writers is not only important, it's necessary. As a reminder, the broad theme for this year's contest was freedom, and the guidelines requested that the poems reflect or react to the contemporary socio-political and cultural environment, including but not limited to everything from Black Lives Matter to Me Too to COVID, or a very literal interpretation of what freedom does, or in some cases, does not mean. Every poem that made the final cut successfully explored the guidelines, but the diverse and provocative variations on these themes was extraordinary. Just like last year, some of the pieces seemed pieced together like newspaper headlines. Others invoked family histories, the kinds found in photo albums, and especially the kinds kept secret or spoken about for the first time. And there were some ingenious, if inevitable, references to science, politics, ethnicity, anger, and shame. The weight of these collective words was not inconsiderable, but like the best art, these poems inspire dialogue. They seek understanding, they inspire solidarity. In a time where we're seeing a general lack of courage and common sense, by our elected leaders, by our neighbors, and occasionally ourselves, these poems serve as at once an indictment and an aspiration to our better angels. So, to properly kick things off, any worthwhile poet knows when they're in the presence of greatness. As such, it is a true honor to welcome my friend and the remarkable poet, educator, literary citizen, Holly Karapatakova, the Poet Laureate of Arlington, Virginia. Let me introduce her, and then I will get out of the way. Holly, as I said, is the current Poet Laureate of Arlington County in Virginia. She's the author of 2 books of poetry, and her current manuscript projects, Still Life with White and Planter's Wife, grapple with the deep wounds left by our history of racism, slavery, and environmental destruction. She's also the author of over 20 books for children. She holds an MFA in creative writing and a PhD in English in comparative literature, and she teaches at the Department of Literature and Languages at Marymount University, which she is proudly rocking tonight. Holly, my friend, sincere gratitude. You elevate the proceedings. It's a true honor to always work with you, but I don't take it lightly. You're always kind enough to support us, but to have you here tonight is very meaningful to me. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was a lovely introduction. Got to live up to that now, right?
No worries.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you all to hear your amazing poetry. I just want to say a huge thank you to 1455 for holding this contest, hosting this reading, for giving us a chance to lift up the voices of our young poets, because you are our future in every way imaginable, and you give us hope and you inspire us. Like Sean said, I'm a teacher at Marymount University, so I spend a lot of time with young writers. I also spend a lot of time with Arlington youth poets, and my role is Arlington Poet Laureate. And I'm also the parent of a 17-year-old rising senior in high school. So I know firsthand what it is to be a young person now in this world. And I know the burden that is on you. I know also how difficult the past couple of years have been with going through COVID, just how much everyone's mental health has been pushed to the brink. We've all had to deal with social isolation, but it's been particularly heavy burden for our young people. Our young people have lost family members and friends. They've lost months and years of education. They've missed sports seasons, field trips, proms, graduations, etc. And I know things are starting to return to normal, and that is amazing. I am more grateful than anyone, but I know that the mental health damage that's been done by the last couple of years is going to continue to be with us well into the future. But also, in spite of all the difficulty that we've been facing the past few years, I've been so encouraged by the strength and resilience of young people, the ways they've managed to survive, to care for themselves and others, and the support of my awesome students who have shared their stories and their struggles with me through writing and through other means. They've really kept me sane. We've kept each other sane and functional through everything that's been going on. And I genuinely feel lucky every day for the young people in my life, for their willingness to engage with writing and with the world in spite of what they've been through. And one of the things that makes me so profoundly happy to hear young poets read, to know that poetry is alive and well among young people, is that I believe in writing as a powerful form of hope, of creation, especially in the face of adversity. Poetry is a language for our hurt and our frustration. It's an outlet for our grief and our anger, as that amazing poem by Sekou made so clear. It's also a means for healing ourselves and for healing other people who our poetry might touch. And it's also a way to bring people together. As Poet Laureate, I've had a chance to see just how wonderful poetry works in terms of building community, bringing people together in a time of despair and division. And I believe poetry is especially urgently needed right now in this moment, because for a number of reasons. For one thing, poetry is not judgmental. It doesn't require a simplistic either or worldview, which often feels like our world is pushing us toward. There's no right or wrong, no matter how it's taught in school. I know sometimes it's taught not well, but there's no right way to read a poem. There's no right way to write a poem. It's inclusive and expansive. One of my favorite lines from a poem is Walt Whitman's, "I contain multitudes." And poetry really does convey multitudes. It allows us to share our truth, to share our experience in a way that doesn't exclude other truths or other experiences, and in a way that can reach out and bring people in rather than shutting them out or reinforcing our divisions, which feel so stark right now. So I just want to say a huge thank you to our readers tonight for choosing poetry. Thank you for being here to share your words with us, to inspire us. And I know I speak for all the adults on this Zoom, all the adults viewing this session when I say that you give us great hope, not just for the future of poetry, but for the future of humanity. So thank you. And I'm going to share a few of my poems with you. One of the things I love most about poetry is that it allows me to confront issues I feel conflicted and ambivalent about, and ask questions that don't have answers. And I love this country dearly. In fact, my husband just officially became a US citizen today. He went through, it was really exciting. He went through his confirmation, his ceremony today. So that was a really exciting moment for my family. He's a political refugee and an immigrant. And he chose to become, he's been a resident of America for many years, but he chose to become a citizen today because he does believe in what this country stands for and the good that it can be. That said, there are a lot of things that I feel very angry about and a lot of questions that I have. And this poem is about some of those. It's called Dear America. Dear America, I called and no one answered. I left voice messages, sent texts and emails, lost in the ether. Tell me things aren't as bad as they seem. Tell me that's not a bullwhip in your back pocket, smallpox on your hands, fossil fuels foaming between your teeth. Tell me when La Migra pounds on the door, when blue lights flash beneath an overpass and drones swarm the sky like birds of prey, they leave no bodies behind. Tell me only the map is darkening, only the sun passing behind a cloud. So thank you, Sean. I am firmly convinced that being young has never been easy. No matter what time period or what era you become an adult, it's never an easy transition. But there are some really specific issues, serious issues that I believe make being a young person now infinitely more stressful than it has been in the past. And one of those, of course, is gun violence. And this next poem comes out of my experience as a parent of school-age children, dealing with gun threats, it seems like all the time happening at my children's schools. And this is a response to one in particular. It's called Message Left on the Washington Liberty High School Attendance Line. My son is not feeling well today. I am keeping him home from school. There was another threat last night on social media. Someone typed arsenal, typed blow the school to smithereens. The children are afraid to go to school. Their parents are afraid. There are assault rifles in every neighborhood. I am not feeling well today. I break into tears spontaneously. The children are sick and staying home from school. They are sick of being afraid. This is not a political statement. There are AR-15s for sale online. My son does not want to live this way. The school says there is no credible threat. Increased police presence is just a precaution. They care about my child's safety. I break into tears spontaneously. My son is not feeling well. I am keeping him home. He is sick of living this way. There are so many guns. There are so many children. Our country is sick. My son is staying home from school. And I'm going to read a poem. I write a lot about immigration and exile because my husband's a political refugee, and many of my students are political refugees. This poem is written specifically for a student of mine who walked here from Guatemala alone when he was 13. He is one of the most beautiful, peaceful, kind souls that I know. He actually teaches ESL in Alexandria now. But he left Guatemala to escape gang violence on his own. And so this is in response to his journey here. But also I've connected the idea of exile with the original exiles, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And this is called Song of the Exiles. There never was a garden, only a leaving, miles and miles of footprints in the dirt. In the beginning, the shattered sun, the wind, and nothing left but our shadows sifting through the dust behind us. When we turned, we did not turn to salt. When we turned, there was nothing behind us to burn, nothing to return to. Though who could blame us for turning, with only the long days ahead, tongues tripping in the dirt. They said we didn't belong. They blamed us for leaving the garden, which never was or would be. Where could we go? We who had come from nowhere and hence could not return. And I wanted to leave you with something positive, on a positive note, because I do believe fully in the power of poetry to uplift, to transform experience, to create beauty and joy, even in a world that seems broken beyond repair. Poetry sometimes feels like one of our last hopes, right? But this poem is about an experience I had with my daughter in the spring. She's much younger, she's in middle school now. But this was in the spring of 2021. After a year of COVID, online learning, we were all at the end of our mental rope. And so my daughter and I decided to plant a garden. This is called Planting. My daughter and I are planting seeds. It's early spring, the long COVID winter behind us, more uncertainty ahead. We've stopped numbering our griefs, started holding tighter to the loved ones still with us. I dig small holes with my fingers and my daughter drops in seeds, then we both smooth the dirt on top. When she was younger, she worried when the seeds disappeared. She'd try to dig them up again to make sure they were okay. Now she's older, patient, knows to leave them alone, to water them and wait. Every day she goes out with the watering can to check, and one afternoon, about a week later, she's jumping by the window, motioning for me to come outside and see the small green sprouts that will become lettuce or peas. Wow, she whispers. And because her wonder is contagious, I allow myself to be amazed too at how the earth keeps going, putting forth its tiny seeds after every long winter. Having faith, some of them will dig in roots and grow. Thank you all so much. I can't wait to hear your poems.
Holly, thank you. I mean, thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And thank you for sharing your beautiful work. It's so inspiring. It's so timely. It's so critical for where we're at. I feel very uplifted.
Thank you.
So thank you. All right, we're almost ready to get to our featured stars tonight, but I would be very remiss to not introduce my friend and my hero, Maya Siegel. Maya has been my co-judge for this contest from its inception. And as far as I'm concerned, she will continue to serve that role as long as she wishes. I won't make any mafia jokes about once you come in, you can't come out. It's really more of a, please, Maya, just please continue to do this with me. But the best compliment I can pay her, aside from the fact that she's a wonderful human being, she's an unbelievably gifted writer. I don't feel comfortable making final decisions on this contest without her input. She provides incredibly intelligent, useful, and relevant insight. And I'm delighted to say, high five. We tend to see the same, every year. We generally have almost immediate consensus. So while it would be a fun story to say, we get in the trenches and claw and fight, that would be fine, but we never have to do that. I will flatter myself by saying maybe my poetic sensibility is almost as elevated as hers, and I'm trying to level the playing field. But Maya, I'm gonna introduce you, but it occurs to me and I want you to correct me in real time. I'm probably leaving out some stuff because this hasn't been updated in a year. So let me give the bare bones, and then I'm going to welcome you to say some things, but whatever I leave out, please correct me. But Maya's poetry is forthcoming or has been published in the Southern Poetry Anthology from Texas Review Press, the Bennington Review, Poetry London, and elsewhere. Her poetry has been recognized by institutions such as the Poetry Society and the Young Arts Foundation. She attends Yale University and is coming to us live from the Big Apple. Maya, thank you, my friend, for being here. I want to cede the stage, say whatever you want. I'd love you to talk a little bit about your thoughts on the poems. And if you want to read some poems, that's always welcome.
Perfect. Yeah. First off, thank you so much, Sean, for having me. I love doing this competition each year. I love hearing everyone. Holly, your poems were amazing, and I'm so excited to hear all the winners. So one thing that stood out to me with the poems in this contest this year was that obviously the theme was freedom, but what stood out to me was the focus on form and sort of like constricting your language and sort of finding your voice in these sort of boxes that you make for yourself. And so I was really impressed by the kind of formal decisions that poets were making, whether it was just really, really consistent line breaks every time, ending on really dynamic words, or whether it was, poems that were, redactions of documents and having that be a really visual experience, or, poems that were in sort of like a block form that were really playing with that repetition and sort of like having that in a very kind of condensed format. There was really like very intense technical skill, and that was really, really nice to see. And as a young poet myself, it's so fun to see what people are writing now and what people are thinking. And it's always just really a joy to see everything. So I'm going to be quick. I'm going to read 2 poems and then give it to the winners. So the first one is called Fiona Visits New York. A man in the subway car strokes his rat. He keeps taking it in and out of his satchel where it shifts under the waxed canvas. I grab your wrist as its tail flicks out. The subway swings as if it hangs on a string. We grip the poles and you tell me you feel nervy. When you say this, you hold the space where your acrylic nail fell off. The rat's tail stiffens. When we exit the subway car, there will be a man waiting for you. The 2 of you will go to a dark part of the park and he will gnaw at your skin. The gnawing will go on for hours. When I walk you to him, he will hold out his hand to you like an alien touching a strange life form. You will grip his arm like a subway pole and his skin will pale where you press. He will not notice your missing nail, the smallness of your finger. The park will start darkening at the edges and the 2 of you will start your parade in. And then I'm also reading one called Great Men. I am the greatest man on the Q train right now. I go to the opera in velvet and an old woman winks at me, and at the opera, a giant egg descends from the ceiling. I go to work and everyone is very unserious, and I consider myself the greatest man in the office. I am the fact checker. I check the fact. A great computer programmer once said, coding mistakes create consciousness, and it is not a fact. It is made up, actually. I am the greatest computer programmer to create consciousness. I mean, to make a mistake. My boss has a tall glass of beer at lunch. When I find a fact that is wrong, he thanks me and keeps it exactly the way it was. I tell him I would like to be useful, like a purse, holding importance. He shows me his book on poetic terrorism. He says, this holds importance. No, I say, unless there's space in poetic terrorism to put my keys. Right, thank you. And so excited to hear everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Maya. Again, high five to my co-judge, my boss. Again, this contest does not happen without you. So this is a co-celebration for Maya and I to see the poems that we were fortunate to read and choose. So what I'd love to do is for each of the poets to introduce themselves. I think that's a little better than me trying to read a bio. And if they're willing, talk a little bit about their poem and then read their poem for us. So I think it's appropriate. We had 2 grand prize winners. We had 2 categories, by the way, this year. 13 to 18 was category 1, and ages 19 to 25 was category 2. So our grand prize winner in category 1 is Elizabeth Keller. Elizabeth, congratulations. Thank you for being here. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm 17. I write poetry and other things sometimes. So my poem is called It's 2020, and I see Henry David Thoreau in a fair trade coffee shop. So this started, as a lot of my poems start, with just like, this would be fun. Like, what if Henry David Thoreau was plucked from the 1800s and deposited in a coffee shop in the midst of the pandemic? And I was also thinking a little bit about Walden and how he is known for like this self-imposed isolation. But in reality, his mom like delivered fresh baked pies every week. So there's kind of some things to explore in there. And then I was also thinking about the pandemic and the isolation and kind of how we're all coming off of that to some extent. Different, maybe not necessarily stronger, just different. So I was thinking about all of that in this poem. So it's 2020 and I see Henry David Thoreau at a fair trade coffee shop. I hate being alone. It's one of the first things all my friends said they noticed, that there's a lot of not me in my head and its fingernails are far too sharp for any of our good. It's June and the lockdowns are lifted, though it's still only my room I feel safe in. The lighthearted burn of Clorox wipes settles something in my chest, but I like the smell of matcha lattes more. I head over to Walden, the only coffee shop with curbside pickup. I see him there. He's become almost a regular. Because of the name, I think. Maybe when you found a time machine in the woods or some crazy shit like that, the difference between coffee grinders and steel cook stoves blurs enough for both to feel like home. I skimmed Walden, the book, to pass freshman year English. I used to admire isolation like that, making everything, even the fingernails, disappear. Now that I've lived it, I'm not so sure. I noticed that Thoreau is wearing a mask, but it's woven roughly out of cattail stalks. He gets his coffee and steps out into the plaza, arms waving, eyes the simple pinpricks of a flea. We're all living and dying and buried, he shouts, talk of the divinity of man. He mumbles something else about the bravery of muskrats, but I can't quite make out his point. Now I notice that he's standing in the middle of a circle of 5 spaced out picnic tables. He's a preacher in this church full of pigeon poop and cheap plastic cups and 30-year-old men in flannel jackets, rolled eyes hidden behind the thick foam of face shields. Everyone's so far away. One of the men laughs and points his phone at Thoreau. This is a charity that hides a multitude of sins, Thoreau mumbles, confused. Another man chuckles and does the same. I watch as the flea's wings get plucked off, slowly, one by one. His cattail mask slips down his chin, his coffee, cold brew, splatters onto the concrete. I step forward into the circle, shooting apologetic looks at the men. I know I'm far too close. I reach out a hand to Thoreau. His own hands look muddy with streaks of white. I wonder if he was digging around in the pigeon poop. I want him to hold me. From the way the mud hasn't fully dried, I know his hands are warm and soft. I would let him use my shower. He would whisper words into my skin, simplicity, cattail. Henry, I say, come with me. He doesn't take my hand. He's puddled on the ground, and I wonder if fleas have blood. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country, he says. I want to ask him how he did it. I don't. Instead, I haul him up by his collar and face the crowd. The light reflecting through the coffee cups makes everyone beautiful, and the fingernails have become a good kind of pain. I leave him, standing confused in his cold brew covered coat as I walk back to my apartment. I dial my friends. As the phone rings, I find my old copy of Walden and stuff a page in my mouth, savoring the earthy taste of the ink as it dissolves on my tongue. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I neglected to point out that all of these poems and some others, including some highlights from selected poems, are going to appear in our annual special edition of the Young Poets issue of our bi-monthly magazine, Movable Type. And in that issue, there'll be some thoughts in writing from Maya and myself. So I do want to keep my own editorial commentary light tonight. Just suffice it to say, what I adore about that poem is that it ties this theme together. It somehow manages to weave so many of the obsessions that we've been forced to confront during this pandemic, and especially sensitive people, sensitive literary people, and tying imaginatively all of these themes together and kicking it off with a title like that. I remember when I opened the document and thought, that's a great title, but boy, is that setting a bar really high for the poem, and the poem reached that level. It closes indelibly and has stayed with me since I read it. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I thank you so much for being here to read that for us.
Yeah, it grounds this incredibly fantastical situation and these really kind of real details. I'm still thinking about the fingernails, the smell of the coffee. And so it makes this feel like possible, and I can be there, I can see it. So really a masterful use of the small detail and carrying it through. Yeah.
Bravo. So congratulations. Our second grand prize winner for category 2, which is ages 19 to 25, is Lucia Gonzalez. And I'm going to take a crack. I should have done my homework. I'm going to try to pronounce it, and then you can pronounce it and make me look dumb. But her poem, Y para nuestros papas.
Close enough.
Well, talk about, please introduce yourself, say the poem the right way, talk about it, and please read it for us.
Of course. So my name is Lucia Gonzalez, and my poem is Y para nuestros papás. So my poem is actually part of a chain of poems. The poet Hanif Abdurraqib wrote a poem called USA versus Cuba after a poem that Frank O'Hara created, and Sarah Kay wrote a poem called Jakarta January after Hanif's poem, and I wrote this poem after Sarah and Hanif's poems. But I worked on this poem for about a year. I knew for a couple months what sort of structure I wanted to follow. I really like poems that sort of collapse on themselves and repeat lines in a way that brings new meaning. But I was really intimidated to start a task like that. I'm not really a poet, I guess. I don't really write regularly. But it's something that I really love, and I really like how this poem came out. So again, the title is Y para nuestros papás. It is Father's Day, and my father parks his pickup truck at our apartment and says my grandfather has died. I mean to say my father's father has died, and my father does not attend his father's funeral. And I now know why my dad has no religion, because sometimes God has too many families to take care of, and my father's father left his family for another woman and had a son who went to college. And I am at the airport flying off to college because my father left his family for another country in the back of a pickup truck on the way to an airport, and I am 5 years old. And my mother, I mean to say my father's ex-wife, asks me if I know whether my dad has another family, y le pregunto si tiene una novia, and for years I mistake novia for wife, and God was always my mother's excuse for her mistakes. And I am in high school telling colleges that my mother considers me her worst mistake. And for years, I mistake abuse for anger. So my dad drives me in his pickup truck to our new apartment for the first time. And for the first time, I realize I am the only family my father has ever known. And I am at a college across the country, and for the first time, I am away from the only family I have ever known. And my cousin has just told me that our grandfather has died. I mean to say my mother's father has died. And I now know why my grandmother is so religious. I mean to say my mother's mother is so religious because Jesus was once the name of the man she fell in love with, and my mother does not attend her father's funeral. And I am at an airport pointed home. And my father and I are on the 405 on the way home from the airport. And he asks me if I'm hungry, but I hear him say, Mija, I know what it is like to have a stomach filled only with your aspirations for tomorrow. And he shows me a picture of the morning sun painting herself across the sky at the airport construction site. And I ask him if he's read about the pickup truck that crashed at the border. And we sit in silence. And we wonder how many fathers won't return to their families.
Thank you so much, Lucia. There's such a quiet, forceful wisdom in those lines. You know, I find that every year when we do this contest, it is not the most profound thought, but it's like the winners obviously stand out right away. But there's something about the finalist poems that always, they are very clear and their meaning is obvious on the first read, but it's almost implied that it's going to require more readings. And I feel like there's a whole novel, there's a whole saga of emotion and observation in that relatively short poem. And I'm just kind of in awe of what you achieved there. So I want to just say thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a really great linking between form and content in this poem. And there's like the repetition in the poem, it really mirrors like the cyclical nature of these family ties and kind of the repeating of these, you know, the ex-wife of the grandfather or the ex-wife of the father, it repeats, and you get that sense of history churning as you go through the poem.
Yay. Okay, moving along, our second place winner in category 1 for the poem Home Gone, History Lost is Samantha Singh. Samantha, welcome. Talk to us about yourself and your poem.
All right, so I actually wrote this, well, first off, my name is Samantha and I'm a rising high school senior. I wrote my poem Home Gone, History Lost actually in my AP US History class. It's an erasure of both the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Magnuson Act, which was the act that repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I honestly wasn't going to finish this poem, but my history teacher made this kind of unit project thing for us to really just do whatever we wanted and be creative. So yeah, I ended up finishing it and it was the best decision of my life. So I'll read it now. Home Gone, History Lost. 1. An erasure of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Execute us, suspend us, swallow our bones. We are on fire, as in we are shadows in the light, part persona, part labor, part failure in this foreign country. Erased before mentioned by the English language, translation lost, name forged, flesh imprisoned. We arrived as passengers at the port of time, forfeited and seized and deemed guilty of the blood in our bones. 2. An erasure of the Magnuson Act. America strips us of our mouths until all that is left is skin. Thank you.
Um, yeah, I mean, again, there's nothing more. I think Holly would agree with me. There's this very odd feeling when you read, and all of these poems fit this pattern of you're at once inspired and gratified to see young people with such talent, but there's also kind of this weird pang of like, where is this brilliance coming from? So it's like, it's hopeful for the future, but there's also a little bit of envy, and it's a very positive, inspiring envy. But I really am in awe of all of these poems and some of this mastery. And I'll add, I do believe, I don't think it's a cliche when people say you need to hear poems, as opposed to reading them. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And that's what this ceremony is all about. But I also am such an old school, I love to be able to spend time with the words. So I really look forward to everyone that's checking this out tonight, and people that will see the movable type issue will be able to see the real craft on display and how these words really come together on the page.
Yeah, these poems were such a visual experience, really in that way. Almost where you were participating in the poem on several different levels, where you're looking at, the redaction and you're looking at the redacted. And I think it was kind of a really radical idea of freedom as erasure of exclusion, right? Which is like what's going on here. It's like, by erasing this exclusionary, act, maybe you're creating a sort of freedom in being able to tell a story between those lines. And I found that really, really a new idea and one worth following.
Full agreement. Thanks, Maya. Thanks, Samantha. Okay, second place winner in category 2, Annalisa Hansford, for her poem, When a Cis Person Asks Me If Trans People Are Birthed from Tenderness or Violence, I Tell Them. Annalisa, welcome. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and your poem, and then read it.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm Annalisa, and I'm a rising sophomore at Emerson College. And I have work published in the Aurora Journal, Celestite Poetry, and Vibe. But yeah, my poem is just about kind of how trans people are ostracized and kind of like policed by religious people. And I'll just let the poem speak for itself. So this is my poem. When a cis person asks me if trans people are birthed from tenderness or violence, I tell them we were wounded born, created from the bruises of the living. We feasted on the dying and the decaying, the expiring and the exhaling. We were the birth of the boneless, owing our breaths to disease and the desire to overcome it. To flourish, we overdose on violence. And isn't that just another word for nature? Grass blades, blood moons, a murder of crows. And what is a name if not an assumption? Can a hurt be named without lungs or language? Because what is a name if not a possession? Like violets, we are an echo of all the people we hurt. Kneeling for a violence instead of a God, we wounded our flesh before the sense could. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalisa. There's something to be said, and you put it perfectly. Well, I'll let my poem speak for itself. Well, it does. And I think all of us would agree. There's plenty of room. There should be plenty of room for play, context, subtlety, and your poem has those elements. But that is a poem that grabs the reader by the shirt and says, "I'm gonna speak some truth." It's truth that needs to be heard, and is told beautifully from a place of vulnerability but clarity. Again, I feel better informed. I feel like a better human for having read that. So I'm really grateful for you sharing that work with us and being here tonight to read it.
Yeah, there's this great like mythological quality in the poem. There I think like there's like blood and there's violets and there's this incredible, very visceral imagery. And it's really nice to kind of have that segued from the title immediately. You feel this like kind of fountain into this really, really visceral imagery. And so that was was really just like a wonderful way to set it up, and you really felt like you flowed through.
Congratulations. Amazing. Okay, so I made an executive decision, and I'm the executive director, so I try not to wear that hat very often, but there were way too many great poems. I feel, and I think Maya and I are in agreement, we felt great about these finalists. There's no question. But in fairness, there were a lot of very worthy poems. I, as a poet myself, there's always something kind of uncomfortable about judging and ranking, but these poems, made themselves, it was very obvious that there was a certain symmetry to the poems that made the final cut. And I don't know where I was going with that, other than to kind of reiterate that there were a lot of poems that could have been here, but the ones that are here for a reason. I know where I was going with that. So there were supposed to be 3 for each category, but there were so many great poems in category 1. I made an executive decision to have 2 third-place winners for category 1, which is not to slight the category 2. We'll have some of those in movable type, but I feel great about the next 2 poems sharing third place in category 1. The first is Sophia Liu for her poem, Elegy to the Motherland. Sophia, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm Sophia. I'm a rising high school senior, and I'll be reading my poem, Elegy to the Motherland. This poem was a response to the lack of freedom that Chinese citizens have that was displayed during the centennial celebration of the Chinese Communist Party. And there they sang a song, which is like a national anthem sort of, called Ode to the Motherland, which is like very full of like this nationalistic sentiment. So I took that song and I sort of like had my own take on it, which is Elegy to the Motherland. Elegy to the Motherland. On July 1st, 2021, the Chinese Communist Party, the sole governing party of the People's Republic of China, celebrated its 100th anniversary. Mythological opening, man in black, children in white, red chairs, red flag, red ground, red past. There he is again, the martyr, the savior, the God. 5-star red flags are fluttering in the wind. 15 fighter jets gild the sky with exit wounds. The sky, a mother, this country, an orphan. When it was easier and Weigong bought a slab of pork on a good day, I would have expected to grow up sequentially. Instead, I interweave 2 histories masquerading as the truth. Instead, when I bleed only secondary colors, a liquid magenta, perfumed olive. How clear and bright. Tiananmen Square still tastes like the ghosts of 32 years ago when a man faced a line of tanks after shopping. Nainai's apartment, its walls blemished with her crayoned handprints, still sings the aftermath of Red Guard wreckage. Over the turbulent Yellow and Yangtze rivers, so many good girls share my last name. Their teal skirts smile in the wind, their mouths an oblivious orange. I want to believe that in pandemonium, my mother could recognize me as her daughter, that she would not tap the shoulder of a black-haired seed and let her sprout into my shadow. I need to believe that I am good enough to be her daughter. The heroic people have stood up. A strong heart is innocent, but an idle body is not. What do red and red make? Color in a meaningless sky. Sun vanished, I pivot to the man who claims to take its place. The heroic people have stood up. I put the hammer on trial. Anyone could be a hero if they say they are enough times. one house, one face, two faces, five faces, 10, 100, 1,000. The stench of history is too rotten to varnish. I know there are more to be counted. Singing for our beloved, I crack my head and spill blood on the great wall of steel. Our beloved motherland, I write a pain for the unremembered. Beloved motherland, O martyr, O savior, O God, teach me how to distill tragedy.
Wow. I think there's so many uses for poetry. We've talked about them a little bit tonight. I think the poems that really spoke to me when I was younger and continue to speak to me are the poems that bear witness, the poems that speak for those that cannot speak or have been silenced, the voices that cry out. And I think right now in 2022, and considering what's going on in the world and what's always gone on in the world, that we're refreshed, learning anew. It's never been more important to bear witness. I think all of you in your way are old souls with a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of old soul and unbelievable reportage and the weight of history in that poem. Just an astonishing achievement.
And I love how this poem, right, talks about, huge governmental, institutions. And then also you have the family drama, you have fearing that your mother wouldn't be able to find you in a crowd. And that feels like such a feat to be able to balance both of those fears in a poem and have them feel equal and have them feel both as terrifying. And I especially love the usage of color, and the idea of losing ownership of certain colors, of only being able to have the secondary colors. That really stuck out to me when I read it the first time, and then every time after.
Fantastic. Okay, last and certainly not least, our third place winner in category 1. This was another one where the title for me immediately caught my attention, and in maybe an unfair way made me think this better be really good, and it was. Unfortunately, this young poet, Delana Ogachukwu, intended to be here and could not, was respectful and courteous enough to let me know he wasn't going to be able to make it, which I was sad to hear, but I asked him if he would mind if I read his poem because I wanted it to be read. It certainly will appear like all these other poems in the issue of Movable Type is forthcoming, but it was important to me that it was heard, and he did give me his permission. So with his permission and my gratitude, I'm going to read Delana's poem. It's called Poem About Boys Who Died Before They Were Born, and it's dedicated to closeted queer people. And there's a quote at the beginning from Madeline Teen, "We've got no future here. You know what that means, don't you? It's like dying before you're born." In our corner of the desert, you cross paths with a dead boy you loved, eyes turned downwards, forcing yourself to forget fantasies of companionship, reminding yourself someone is always watching. Your whole life, people have looked into your wide green eyes, noticed some rotten, unseeable thing, and whispered, FAGGOT, when you weren't in the room. It could have been the dresses or dolls or pink phones or some other stereotype that let them all know even before you realized. There's a danger in being seen, especially when you're blind to the look of contemptuous eyes. In 7th grade, was hit by a car in front of our school. Someone left a pink bracelet in the boys' locker room. The coach was furious, demanded he know which girl left it, hoping the bracelet didn't belong to one of us. You didn't hear him talking to Ms. Bell, explaining how he really felt. You didn't know Coach was on the brink of an irrevocable act of violence. It's better when no one notices you. Easier, safer, freer. Being forgotten is a type of freedom for boys like us. My ideal future is invisibility, fading into the gray of a shadow, or becoming air. That would mean no more danger, because we'd be somewhere else, because we'd be free. I could kiss you on the lips in any restaurant, go on picnic dates with you in the public park, walk down the empty street with you late at night, the last street lights flickering on and off, hand in hand, dressed as queerly as possible, fearing no one. That poem spoke to me for obvious reasons, because it's a well-crafted, very emotional, very felt statement. But I think in terms of the theme of freedom, it reminded me, and I hope I don't need reminding. I'm happy to be reminded as often as necessary as a straight white man, the absolute freedoms that I take for granted that so many of my brothers and sisters that are white and straight have never even had to question. I think we've done better in recent years for a variety of good reasons, but to think about freedom and the notion of an America who are all, equally free and have the same opportunities, of course that's not true, and it's never been true. So to be able to articulate wishing for freedom that so many other people don't even think twice about is very powerful. I think is a very necessary, a very urgent reminder. And I hope we hear a lot more voices like that, so that more of us are able to listen and learn.
Yeah, and one thing that really stood out was, right, this lack of freedom makes these small moments so incredibly fraught. The moment of the kiss at the restaurant, you feel just the intensity of that so intensely. It actually reminded me of one of my favorite movies, Moonlight by Barry Jenkins, and they have this incredibly intense scene at a restaurant of him not being able to come out for some time and finally being able to. And I thought, like, to be able to sort of reflect that moment in a poem and was really, really hit you in the gut. Yeah.
Right on. Holly, I certainly welcome any kind of closing thoughts or observations from you.
I am absolutely blown away. You all are amazing. And please, keep writing poems like these. They speak to us, but they speak to your peers. They make people feel heard. And you're doing exactly what our opening video talked about, speaking for people who are coming from similar circumstances, who may not be able or feel the same freedom to speak. So be aware that when you speak for yourself, but you also reach other people. And your words have impacted me very, very deeply tonight. So thank you so much for your courage and for sharing.
Yeah. I'll just remind everyone that's watching, we are at 1455. We are tremendously proud to hold this contest. It's a great joy. It's a labor of true labor of love to read and judge the poems, which we do humbly. We take it very seriously. And I'm so excited to, as once again, dedicate an entire issue of Movable Type. Maybe August, it may be early September, but soon all of these poems and bios and headshots will be properly immortalized, and we couldn't be more happy about that. So Maya, any thoughts from you before we
I'm so excited to get my copy and to have that sort of token of this evening. And yeah, keep writing. Please keep reading. And we hope to see you guys back here next year, future years. Please, yeah.
One of my joys, and maybe we can explore this next year, is the Young Poet Alumni panel. So let's I'm going to put that seed in my own mind. But yes, let me echo what my fellow writers and educators and poets are saying, which is keep writing. You may not have any idea how much you're inspiring other people. If it's inspiring you, that's well worth the effort and the solitude and a world of rejection, because the glory of putting something that only you could write into the world and having it move other people is such a gift. It's a miracle of sorts. And boy, does our world need some miracles right now. So on behalf of the organization, I want to thank each and every one of you. Thank you for taking the time to show up tonight. It's like we throw a party with this festival, but the party wouldn't mean much if great people didn't come and people didn't show up to see it. So I thank all of you. Maya, I can't say enough great things. Thank you for being my partner in crime. To be continued. Holly, Poet Laureate of Arlington, Virginia, amazing poet, educator, ideal literary citizen and advocate, and friend. Thank you for being here. You grace us with your presence. It's just a wonder to continue to work with you. And Sekou Andrews, the biggest of all possible shout outs from the East Coast back out to you. Thank you for inspiring all of us. And thank you for the work you do for poetry and culture. We'd be lesser without all of these words we've heard tonight. So I ask everyone to keep writing, be safe, be well, and we will see you soon.